The Mystery of the Scandinavian Ghost Rockets, Part 1. Hi, this is Anthony. Welcome back to my show. As always, before I begin, please click the subscribe button below. It really helps me out and it doesn't cost you anything. Thanks so much. Ghost rockets, or Scandinavian ghost rockets, were rocket or missile-shaped unidentified flying objects sighted in 1946 mostly in Sweden and nearby countries like Finland. The first reports of ghost rockets were made on February 26, 1946 by Finnish observers. About 2,000 sightings were logged between May and December 1946, with peaks on the 9th and 11th of August 1946. 200 sightings were verified with radar returns, and authorities recovered physical fragments which were attributed to ghost rockets. Investigations concluded that many ghost rocket sightings were probably caused by meteors. For example, the peak of the sightings on the 9th and 11th of August 1946 also fall within the peak of the annual Perseid meteor shower. However, most ghost rocket sightings did not occur during the meteor shower activity, and furthermore displayed characteristics inconsistent with meteors, such as reported maneuverability. Debate continues as to the origins of the unidentified ghost rockets. In 1946, however, it was thought likely that they originated from the former German rocket facility at Peenemünde and were long-range tests by the Soviets of captured German V-1 or V-2 missiles, or perhaps another early form of cruise missile because of the ways that they were sometimes seen to maneuver. This prompted the Swedish Army to issue a directive stating that newspapers were not to report the exact location of ghost rocket sightings or any information regarding the direction or speed of the object. This information, they reasoned, was vital for evaluation purposes to the nation or nations assumed to be performing the tests. Descriptions and early identifications. The early Soviet origin theory was rejected by Swedish, British, and U.S. military investigators because no recognizable rocket fragments were ever found. And according to some sightings, the objects displayed some combination of leaving no exhaust trail, moving too slowly, flying horizontally, traveling and maneuvering in formation, and appearing to be silent. The sightings most often consisted of fast-flying rocket or missile-shaped objects with or without wings, visible for mere seconds. Instances of slower-moving cigar-shaped objects are also known. A hissing or rumbling sound was sometimes reported. Crashes were not uncommon, almost always in lakes. Reports were made of objects crashing into a lake, sometimes then propelling themselves across the surface before sinking. The Swedish military performed several dives in the affected lake shortly after the crashes, but found nothing other than occasional craters in the lake bottom or torn-off aquatic plants. The best known of these crashes occurred on July 19, 1946, in the Lake Kolmjarv in Sweden. Witnesses reported a gray rocket-shaped object with wings crashing into the lake. One witness interviewed heard a thunderclap, possibly the object exploding. However, a 3-week military search reported nothing. Immediately after the investigation, the Swedish Air Force officer who led the search, Carl Gustaf Bartol, submitted a report in which he stated that the bottom of the lake had been disturbed but nothing was recovered, and that, quote, there are many indications that the Kolmjarv object disintegrated itself. The object was probably manufactured in a lightweight material, possibly a kind of magnesium alloy that would disintegrate easily and not give indications on our instruments, unquote. When Bartol was later interviewed in 1984 by Swedish researcher Claes Svahn, he again said that their investigations suggested the object largely disintegrated in flight and insisted that, quote, what people saw were real physical objects, unquote. On October 10, 1946, the Swedish Defense Staff publicly stated, quote, most observations are vague and must be treated very skeptically. In some cases, however, clear, unambiguous observations have been made that cannot be explained as natural phenomenon, Swedish aircraft, or imagination on the part of the observer. Echo, radar, and other equipment registered readings but gave no clue as to the nature of the objects, unquote. It was also stated that fragments alleged to come from the missiles were nothing more than ordinary coke or slag, and here coke and slag are mineral byproducts from refining metals, usually iron, into steel. On December 3, 1946, a memo was drafted for the Swedish Ghost Rocket Committee stating, quote, "Nearly 100 impacts have been reported and 30 pieces of debris have been received and examined by the Swedish National Defense Research Institute." The debris was later said to be meteorite fragments. Of the nearly 1,000 reports that have been received by the Swedish Defense Staff to November 29th, 225 were considered observations of real physical objects, and every one had been seen in broad daylight. U.S. involvement. In August 1946, Swedish Lieutenant Leonard Neckman of the Defense Staff's Air Defense Division saw something that was, without a doubt, a rocket projectile. That's his quote. On August 14, 1946, the New York Times reported that Undersecretary of State Dean Acheson was, quote, "very much interested," unquote, in the Ghost Rocket report, as was U.S. Army Air Force's intelligence, as indicated non-publicly by later documents. Then on August 20th, the Times reported that 2 U.S. experts on aerial warfare, aviation legend General Jimmy Doolittle and General David Sarnoff, president of RCA, arrived in Stockholm ostensibly on private business and independently of each other. The official explanation was that Doolittle, who is now the vice president of the Shell Oil Company, was inspecting Shell branch offices in Europe, while Sarnoff, a former member of General Dwight D. Eisenhower's London staff, was studying the market for radio equipment. However, the Times story indicated that the chief of the Swedish Defense Staff made no secret that he was extremely interested in asking the 2 generals' advice and, if possible, would place all available reports before them. Doolittle and Sarnoff were briefed that on several occasions the ghost rockets had been tracked on radar. Sarnoff was quoted by the New York Times on September 30th, stating that he was, quote, "convinced that the ghost bombs are no myth but real missiles," unquote. On August 22, 1946, the director of the Central Intelligence Group, CIG, Lieutenant General Hoyt Vandenberg, wrote a top-secret memo to President Truman, perhaps based on information from Doolittle and Sarnoff. Vandenberg stated that, quote, "the weight of evidence pointed to Peenemünde as origin of the missiles, that the U.S. military attaché in Moscow had been told by a key Swedish air officer that radar course plotting had led to the conclusion that Peenemünde was the launch site. The CIG speculates that the missiles are extended-range developments of V-1 being aimed at the Gulf of Bothnia for test purposes and do not overfly Swedish territory specifically for intimidation and self-destruct by small demolition charge or burning," unquote. Nevertheless, there are no reports of rocket launches from German sites after February 21, 1945. Swedish military opinion. Although the official opinion of the Swedish and U.S. military remains unclear, a top-secret United States Air Force Europe document from the 4th of November 1948 indicates that at least some investigators believe the ghost rockets, and later flying saucers, had extraterrestrial origins. Declassified only in 1997, the document states, quote, "For some time we have been concerned by the reoccurring reports on flying saucers. They periodically continued to crop up. During the last week, one was observed hovering over Neubiberg Air Base for about 30 minutes. They've been reported by so many sources and from such a variety of places that we are convinced that they cannot be disregarded and must be explained on some basis which is perhaps slightly beyond the scope of our present intelligence thinking." The document continues, "When officers of this directorate recently visited the Swedish Air Intelligence Service, this question was put to the Swedes. Their answer was that some reliable and fully technically qualified people have reached the conclusion that these phenomena are obviously the result of a high technical skill which cannot be credited to any presently known culture on Earth. They are therefore assuming that these objects originated from some previously unknown or unidentified technology, possibly outside the Earth," unquote. The document also mentioned a search for an object crashing into a Swedish lake conducted by the Swedish Naval Salvage Team, with the discovery of a previously unknown crater on the lake floor believed caused by the object, possibly referencing the Lake Kolmjarv search for a ghost rocket discussed above, although the date is unclear. The document ends with the statement that, quote, "We are inclined not to discredit entirely this somewhat spectacular theory, that is, extraterrestrial origins, meantime keeping an open mind on the subject," unquote. Okay, that's enough of the story for today. What do you think so far? Were these evidence of extraterrestrials, or just the Soviets testing captured vengeance rockets from a German location? Or was it just mass hysteria? Look for further parts on this subject in the near future on my YouTube channel. I would really appreciate it if you've made it this far, if you would leave a comment, either positive or negative. And if you like this type of content and want to see more, it would really help me out if you subscribe to this YouTube channel. Also, please view my other videos, and if you like them, click the like button. It also helps me out if you leave a comment in the comment section for each one. I'm on Instagram at AnthonyRRMills. You can follow me there. Thanks for watching, and look for part 2 soon.